Okay, well, I think we're going to call that good for now. I think we might have a few people joining us late this morning also. I know that we have a few people that are down in Christian County talking about the Chadwick Flyer Trail, so it'll be interesting to hear what comes out of that conversation. So one of the first things I wanted to do today was to talk about the recommendations, and thank you everyone for filling out the surveys that I sent. And I just wanted to go over a few things and ask some questions. Hopefully, you know, some of the people on this call today are included among those that answered those surveys. But the results on the potential goals, and we had consolidated them to try to get down to 5 and make it a little bit more reasonable, and then we can backfill with recommendations and then more specific actions under that. But most things were actually pretty positive. It was really just a 1, 2, 3 scale, and no, maybe, and a yes. We had one person that said no on all of them, and so I wanted to get feedback if there is something that we are missing. And then it was just really kind of hit and miss on this connected, integrated, multimodal system. So first, is there, you know, anything that we've just truly missed, or that we, you know, missed the mark on any or all of these? If anyone wants to speak up. Okay, and then kind of in addition to that, I guess, is there any insight as to why the connected, integrated, multimodal maybe wasn't quite as favorably received as the others? You can kind of see in the background on here kind of how the answers trended a little bit lower compared to the others. All right, well, I'm going to have to start calling on people, I guess. So
I've got
Kurt,
a question.
or go ahead.
Sorry, Natasha. When you sent out the survey, was there an option for comments, for
There
additional
was,
comments?
yeah, there was on the second. There was like another slide,
And
but I didn't receive anything. I think I got 2 that said NA.
and to confirm, we got no's on all of these from one
person.
at least one person.
Yeah.
So, okay. That would
But
obviously, and I know this is where you're going. If something has been missed on all of these with someone, that would obviously be key to moving forward. And if it were me, and it wasn't, but if it were, I might hesitate to say that out loud.
True. Yeah.
You know?
No, I'm not asking for someone to say that was me, but yeah.
Sure, of course not. That's why I was asking if there was a section, if there was a place for comments in the survey that might make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. But then generally speaking, especially on that middle one on the connected and integrated, we definitely had some maybes on that as well. And so I just wanted to see if there was maybe another way we could flesh that out, or if there were, maybe it's too broad and should be split up, or maybe it's not quite hitting something that we would want to discuss.
Natasha, this
Yeah.
is Tom EMC. Sorry, but I didn't receive a copy of the survey, so I didn't participate. But obviously, with the work we do here at the TMC, this would have been very high on my list, if that means anything.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Not sure if that you need another vote, and kick that up to 0.4 or something. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, they were generally all positively received, and without any, real specific feedback, my recommendation would be that we move forward on these goals. But if there is an opportunity to tweak or adjust or address anyone's concerns, I definitely want to be able to do that. Jeff, do you have any or go ahead, Kirk. Jeff, do you have any comments from Nix's perspective?
No, Natasha, I was just kind of thinking, the one person that may have put no on all of those, there's always a possibility of one disgruntled person. To me, I would look at that one as almost as an anomaly with the survey. Not to necessarily completely kick that out, but take the negativity with a grain of salt, maybe.
The optimist in me wants to think that they just reverse their 1s and 3s, but I don't know that that's the case. It was a slider. So, Joel, anything from Greene County's perspective?
Not really. I don't remember specifically how I answered the survey, but it seemed like I was more on the positive side than what these results show.
Okay. And Brandy, do you think that these are, something that would help the utility and CU move forward with your transit mission?
Yeah, I'm like you. I was wondering if maybe, somebody just flipped the scale. I think we're supportive of what the group wants to do and just kind of plug along.
Okay. All right. Anyone else that I missed, or MoDOT, do you have any input? Okay. Well, we will move forward. Oh, Kirk, you're coming through really distorted. Okay. And please, if for some reason the audio is not working or coming through or whatever, always feel free to email us too, and we can incorporate that into our discussion. So based on that, I wanted to kind of move ahead to the idea of the recommendations that go into that, and we can take these and turn them into something actionable. I didn't really want to get into that level of wordsmithing today, but some of the things that we had talked about at the last meeting, we hadn't necessarily grouped them under goals, but I just started kind of grouping them underneath these goals that we had talked about. Whoops, something. There we go. So for safe for all users on all modes, I know we've got MoDOT and at least one other community that are really kind of, no pun intended, zeroing in on Vision Zero, which is really an effort to get to no fatalities on the roadways. And so I just kind of put in here support MoDOT's Vision Zero safety efforts, or we can change that to Show Me Zero, which I think is the name of the current blueprint plan. But then also that ties into our performance measures that so far are targets that we've all agreed to kind of program and support of MoDOT's targets on that. And so that would kind of fall in line with that. And then we had discussed at the last meeting about, improving accessibility for transit and on sidewalks and trail, it kind of really gets into everything. And then looking at asset management and fiscal responsibility. Not entirely sure how we want to word this, but setting the groundwork to seek discretionary funding, kind of making sure that we're addressing those things maybe in our plans or in our actions that can support the applications for projects. And so, for example, like the newest infra just had a completely revised set of criteria or, kind of priorities for selection of projects that are different than what we've seen in the past. And so trying to make sure that we have plans that our members can point to when applying for this type of funding that basically would provide hopefully those extra points. And then, we're always looking for opportunities for partnerships. And then, the good condition of our system. So far on our performance measures, our major roads and our bridges, we've been able to really kind of stay in the high numbers and the good condition. We've never really tracked locally, regionally, as far as the OTO goes, our minor roads. We don't really have a lot of that information on the sidewalk or the trail system, but we know that there are places that need attention. And so maybe finding a way to also address that. Looking at the connected integrated multimodal system, continuing to kind of support our communities in their complete streets efforts, our regional trail system. This came up a little bit with our discussion at the last meeting, but developing a strategic plan to create desired transit service. And so I think, kind of what I heard out of Matt in his presentation was, if there is something that, the community wants out of transit, let's figure out what that is and what it takes to do that. And so also continuing to coordinate that service between MSU and city utilities. We need something, I think, on passenger rail, considering the overwhelming amount of requests for that in our survey responses. So maybe it's educating on the challenges of passenger rail. Maybe it's exploring alternatives to passenger rail, and are we talking about more local service like between Branson and Springfield, which comes up over and over, or something that gets us to Kansas City or St. Louis? And then addressing gaps in connectivity within all modes, whether that even means our grid system on our streets or the trail gaps or sidewalk gaps. For being resilient and prepared for the future, I think more and more we're going to need to understand the impact of electric vehicles, automated vehicles, Hyperloop and other technologies, even drone delivery. I'm not sure what role we would play in that, but at least being aware that these kinds of things are coming, maybe whether the regulations are in place or not. And then reviewing ways to be more resilient to external factors, such as COVID, weather. I know that in the airport presentation, they mentioned, kind of some interrupters, such as, 9/11, the Great Recession. So things that, maybe we always have a way to keep moving forward, even when times get interesting. And then finally, under quality projects, implementing best practices, develop attractive projects that add to quality of life in OTO communities. And then this kind of came up at the last meeting, but maybe exploring best practices for complete projects that are fiscally reasonable. So finding ways that, sometimes it's not always maybe just an add-on or a layering, but maybe there's a whole different way to think about a project that gets us the results, but in a more kind of efficient manner. So those are just some of the basics based on the discussion from the last meeting. But are there comments or other things that the group would want us to consider?
Natasha, this is Jeff with
Yeah.
Nixa. Hey, we keep having the passenger rail and things like that come up. Is there a way that we could reach out to a community that actually has this system and just visit with them and see, what it takes to actually run that? And then also put something out to the public showing what financial restraints, that we have now as far as just maintaining the system that we currently have.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to use, those like real world examples of what that looks like. And MoDOT has a lot of information on, Amtrak and the River Runner service between Kansas City and St. Louis and what that takes. And so I think that's something, and we have the rail study that was done before, but I also know that the rail industry has changed a lot and probably even added more on the freight side than what might have even been previously in place. And so that also presents some challenges.
Natasha, I know
Yeah.
Frank, I was looking, I don't see, it doesn't look like he was able to make the meeting, but I know that he had reached out to Cheryl Ball after we got a lot of these comments to ask if we could even do some sort of virtual meeting or something to help, educate and talk through some of them because of some of the challenges that are, of course, go along with the passenger rail, and that it's not just as simple as putting a train on existing tracks and running a service. So, and she had thought it sounded like a good idea, but then looking back at her email that she had responded back, it also acted like maybe they were going to incorporate something into our rail plan and freight plan website, maybe in the new document.
Okay.
And I haven't had a chance to look through it, so I don't know if there's some information in there, but Frank did just, I want to say it was either this week or late last week, say that website had been updated. So I'm going to put a link to it in the chat box over here. That way, everybody can peruse it when they get a chance and see if there is any information out there that might help.
Thanks. And I'd like to find a way to, sorry, Kirk, go ahead.
Should we put something in here about supporting the state level?
I'm sorry, Kirk. I don't know what is going on. Why you sound like you're talking so slow, like someone turned down the speed on your record player.
I think he's on dial-up.
Okay, sorry, Kirk. I'll try to follow up with you at least after the meeting, though. Okay.
Hey, Natasha.
Yeah.
Something else.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Okay. Something else that when you talk about passenger rail alternatives, and alternative that could be, light rail, and the Kansas City streetcar would probably be a good, really recent example of how much those projects cost and how much time and effort goes into those, and, not just the initial cost of getting that established, but the ongoing cost of operating it. So if the group's interested in having just those numbers available, we'd be happy to reach out to KCATA and see if we can get some information.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks. And I do want to, when we, have this conversation with the public, find a way to maybe, keep it positive, or maybe on a brainstorm front rather than, because there really wasn't, it's not like there's been a lot of discussion in the public or in the press or anything about passenger rail. And so it all of a sudden come out and be like, oh, well, here's why we can't have passenger rail. And people would go, where did that come from? Maybe if there's a way to kind of, over the next few years, just open that conversation again, and then, find a way to see what the real desire is there too, because I don't know that people always distinguish light rail, which is local, versus Amtrak, you know, which would be state or nationwide. And I know, you know, just generally a lot of people are like, oh, it'd be great just to take the train to go see a ball game in St. Louis. And so, and if that's the case, then maybe there's, you know, an opportunity for a private provider, like the party bus kind of a thing, where, you know, it's just not a train, but some other sort of scheduled event service or something. So, but that would be great. And I think it's definitely something we need to include a discussion on.
Tasha,
Yeah.
I could add another thought would be, and I'm not sure if it's into the third or the fourth section, but I know that in the fourth one we talk about EVs and AVs, but the whole concept of connected vehicles is something that we're actually currently working on and have been working on. In fact, we're rolling out during the next few weeks, you know, connectivity between the traffic signal system and vehicles, where we're giving real-time status to service providers who provide that then into the vehicles themselves. So
Okay.
we can see a lot of improvements with that, particularly as it relates to, you know, connection to the infrastructure where, you know, ultimately we can warn vehicles whenever we have pedestrians about to cross an intersection, you know, give advance warning to vehicles themselves. Maybe one day in the future, we, you know, can do away with our external detectors we have along the roadway, where the vehicles themselves will be, you know, providing that communication and data exchange to our infrastructure. So anyway, I'm not sure, like I said, I don't know if that fits under the third or fourth bullet or the section, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Yeah, and I can kind of see the question there, because if it's happening right now, it's not really preparing for the future, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
as that technology evolves and continues to, we want to stay on top of that and provide whatever services we can.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. No, I'm sorry, Kirk. I don't know why you sound so slow. But feel free to use the chat if you're at your desk or somewhere you can safely type. Okay, and we'll also go back through and you know, review some of the recommendations and actions that we also had from the prior plan that would be appropriate to carry forward. And then I'll continue to wordsmith these and then develop you know, an actionable, kind of measurable way that we can work towards implementation and know that we're meeting these goals. But if there's anything else that you think just really screams, hey, you missed that concept, or we really should be careful about how we address that, please let me know, either through email or on this meeting.
Natasha, do we also have anything in there about bike share or ride share services?
We do not.
Or scooters. Of course, we haven't seen, you know, Lime or Birds here yet, but it's only a matter of time, I would imagine. So kind of that whole mobility as a service genre.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely add something about that. Okay, well, if there's not anything else on that, make sure I hit save.
And Natasha,
then,
Kirk's got some comments there in the chat.
Oh, there, it's blinking at me. Okay, when you share your screen, you don't always see everything.
Sure.
What do we mean by setting groundwork for discretionary funding? So that goes back to, for example, the new infra grant put a lot of information out there about are you addressing greenhouse gases and climate change? Are you kind of, what's your community's role? And so being able to, as OTO, put that information together. So when our members are applying for this kind of funding, that we're already on top of, or collecting that information to make it easier for those kind of applications. And so, and that's just one example, but especially as administrations change over the next 25 years, or even just what we see these next 5 years before we update our next plan, but just trying to make sure that, our region can, positively address those concerns in those applications. So that's what I meant by that. But I can definitely work on that wording or additional description. And then something that supports additional funding on the statewide level. Yeah, and that's definitely something that came out of our survey and other input as well. And so we can definitely add that in here. Okay. Yep, you're welcome, Kurt. Thanks for getting that input in. Okay. So let's move on to our next agenda item, which is talking a little bit about our performance measures. And let me just reshare my screen here. So, so far, and we have not seen a revised version of these national performance goals in the draft authorization bills, the draft highway bills coming through. And so, so far, I think it would be safe to say that this is probably what we're going to be working with, at least in the near term, as far as having these goals with targets. And so far as OTO, we've just agreed to program and support the state's targets. But I think it would be probably good to look at some things, whether we set them as maybe not follow the exact kind of set our own goals, but exactly for these, but maybe like more of a 5-year goal or a plan kind of time frame goal, but using some of these same factors. And so there's safety, there's infrastructure, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement, which really right now the measure for that is, let's see if they, yeah, so the measure for that's really just kind of using a travel time index for freight. And then environmental sustainability, which we don't have to report right now because we are in attainment. And then reduce project delivery delays, which there's not targets for that on the national level, but I know that is a goal overall. And then on top of that, several transit measures as well for state of good repair and safety. So right now what we have are these that we had set with our 2011 plan, and we kept them in 2016. We also didn't really adjust the targets. We kept them as 2035 targets, and so I'd like to revisit that as well. We have vehicle miles traveled per capita. And I will say, like, that's one that we initially, I think, we're only showing vehicle miles traveled on the MoDOT system. And MoDOT has since expanded that collection ability so that those numbers are available for the entire region. And then modal balance, you know, we really wanted to try to work on encouraging that carpooling and, you know, really, or other modes. We have been stuck at 82, 83% ever since we set this goal. And so I don't know, maybe if that is something we still continue to measure, or if there's a, you know, something else we can do that we can really maybe hopefully try to help drive that down. Also, that's based on the American Community Survey, which is a micro sample of the population. So I'm not entirely sure how much information that's really given us. We have currently a goal to complete the bicycle and pedestrian network. We wanted to add sidewalk and increase the percent of sidewalks along at least one side of the road. And that does continue to improve every year. And so we can review that specifically. And then we also track the trail system and just adding more and more miles. And I know with our regional trail plan, we probably should review what that goal is and what that looks like. And if we say we want, you know, 45 miles of trail by 2045 or whatever that ends up looking like, you know, kind of adjust to that. And so looking at disabling and fatal crashes, we've always kind of seen that as a rate. But if we're also looking at these national performance measures, and then also MoDOT looking at Vision Zero, there might be a different way that we also want to address, at least on the fatal crash side. On-time performance of the transit system, that initial goal had been set based on CU's old system of spot checks. And so, Brandy, I'd be open to, if there's additional transit performance measures you'd like to explore, if this is still one that is you know, valuable, especially with the new system that tracks your buses more regularly. If there's something we want to do there. Percent of housing units within a quarter mile of a bus route. So this one kind of really speaks to the density of the OTO area within Springfield. And, you know, eventually, I guess if we were to expand a bus route to our surrounding communities, that would increase, maybe not the percentage of housing units, but we definitely would have more reach. And so it's kind of slowly inching upwards on that, but there might be something else we want to explore there as well. And as we finalize our recommendations and our actions, that might feed into this also. But looking at average commute time, that's something I know our region continues to talk about and be proud of the fact that those numbers stay low. So I think that's important. Peak travel time, I'd like to review that because I know our way of calculating that's changed, our availability of information's changed. You know, we've even, you know, the way that we used to define severely delayed was 20 miles an hour or more under the speed limit on all roadways, and even in our STIP prioritization, we've adjusted that. So it's probably open for discussion. You know, we say percent of major roads in good condition. The national measures look at the national highway system and the interstate system separately. And so we might want to substitute that as well. And then bridge condition, we may want to look also into splitting that, because while it's great that we're in, you know, above 90%, we've been able to maintain that. Having a better understanding of what those fair bridges are and how quickly they can be not fair anymore, it might be good to kind of better communicate that. And then ozone levels, that's really between that and PM 2.5, that is how we measure air quality in the area. And, you know, I don't know that we necessarily set a goal right now or at an all-time low. So, you know, just being able to stay in attainment, I think, is a definite goal. So any comments on the performance measures as they stand, or suggestions for other things to consider in the area?
Natasha, you touched briefly there on the peak travel times.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can determine, an average travel time outside of peak travel times, and then determine a time frame, of what we think is excessive as far as, just saying severely delayed, whether that's 10-minute delay or, what have you? Is there a way that we can do that to actually put a goal on that?
Yeah, Dave, do you want to address a little bit about kind of the information we now have available?
Yeah, and the short answer is, yeah, we can do that. And I kind of played around with that last spring, was trying to find the slowest period on all the roadways when they occurred and what the differences were. So, we have the ability to kind of look at that in the big data and shift through that. I'm going to take a look at that coming up in the next couple of months as we get ready to do our collection for April and stuff like that. So I think there are some roads out there where the travel speeds are lower just based on other factors rather than how many cars are on the road and congestion and things like that. So I think that's a good point, is to look at that and see what the average speed of that roadway normally is, and then kind of look at the data throughout the day and see where that drops and things like that. So we definitely can do that.
Yeah, and I know that, using, and this has been a lot of that discussion, but, using speed limit doesn't necessarily take into account when you have a roadway with a lot of stoplights and a lot of stop and go. And then at the same time, when things are timed and flowing, you should really be able to achieve speed limit or higher. And so, because people around here I know don't follow the speed limit, but yeah, I think we can definitely look at additional ways to measure and kind of see what that looks like. And Tom, is there anything kind of new coming down, or in addition with this connected vehicle sort of stuff, that we can take advantage of?
We actually are, actually Missouri S&T is going after a grant that we're partnering with them on for the exploring the use of LiDAR to more or less measure the density of roadways and seeing any anomalies in roadway for incident detection and that type of thing. But so they're looking at parsing, because LiDAR data can be huge. So one of the things that they're including in the research is how to parse that and really narrow it down to a usable format. So that's something that's probably far off in the future. But as it relates to looking at performance measures, you'd mentioned, the arterial streets where you've got, obviously control delay with, signals and driveways and everything. One of the measures that we use with our Cyclica data is the idea of delay per mile. So, looking at having that monthly delay or the monthly travel time information, we've taken a look to see what the free flow travel time would have been, and then based on the per mile of arterial that we maintain. So we set a goal of 40 seconds of delay per mile has been, is at least that's our target for this year anyway. And looking at it, of course, we saw a lot more favorable numbers, during the several months this past year when traffic volumes were so much lower. But I think we're probably going to be back up to the level of about 40 seconds per mile on the arterial system. So if we want to explore, using that for the plan, we certainly can, and we can continue to work with Dave and others that are at your office to try to refine how we measure that.
Yeah. And so a little bit of a side discussion on that. There are times when we always talk about peak, and sometimes our peaks are pretty short. They don't necessarily last too long. I think we saw even in our survey results that everyone's like, inconvenient but doesn't last long, that sort of thing. And there might be times when we have safety concerns to address that would maybe slow the non-peak traffic. And the question is what that may or may not do to, peak hour, but, also making sure that when we kind of set these goals that we understand there are times when, it's okay to achieve a different goal instead. But then, that's also on a single roadway versus system-wide. And so, but we do have so much more information available now to be able to kind of do those kind of analyses and stuff too. I'm excited to see if this LiDAR thing comes through, what that ends up looking like in the future.
Yeah, and it's, there's a lot of technology or a lot of systems that utilize video to do essentially the same thing. That KC Scout uses a lot of that for their incident detection up in Kansas City, that area. So, but it's an interesting concept. And I think as we talked about connected vehicles, a lot of that, if we get into looking at future funding or how our transportation system is funded, if we get into more of a user tax type of model, then we may be looking at tracking the number of miles by any individual vehicle or whatever, and what that might look like would give us a whole lot more data to work with.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's probably years off as well.
Yeah, I know, at least with the next round of infrastructure bills, that's pretty much been taken off the table nationwide. And I don't probably see a lot of support for that in Missouri based on, let's just try to get that gas tax increase first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, one of the goals that we've set has been to be fiscally responsible. So maybe there's also, I don't know what that measure would look like, but some sort of, way we can just kind of track funding to the area or additional funding brought in above and beyond, or, things that, or bid savings. I don't know if there's, I know a lot of things are out of our control, but if anyone thinks of anything on that front. Stacy or Brittany, does MoDOT have anything with Tracker that relates to kind of a fiscal measure?
I was trying to think, Natasha.
Yeah. I know you guys track things, but maybe don't necessarily have a goal or a target for them.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. I'll have to do some thinking.
Okay.
Natasha, are you referring to like, we want to meet this goal by this date? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, or just in general, are there things that you guys, through Tracker, I know you guys report internally on a lot of things that maybe aren't even part of the public report, but if there's things that might speak to project savings or other.
Yeah, I mean, we have a variety of obviously different tracking measures, but some we track like our program versus award amounts. So like what are we programming projects to what they're awarded to, and then same goes for like award to like final cost. I think we also have that one to kind of see the big picture. And and as a general rule, all of our tracking measures have a goal, our target to meet, and sometimes we're below that target, and so we talk about, well, what are we going to do to try to improve this measure to get closer to that target. So most of them have something to work towards, and some areas are doing better than others. I could send you a link. All of our stuff, our tracker is online now. It's all electronic. So we have have you been to our website? to look at it recently?
Not recently, but I think I've pulled it down before.
I'll share a link in the,
Okay.
but it's all out there so that you can, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thanks. So
Yeah,
Kirk,
and I
go
guess
ahead.
to go back real quick, you know, I guess when you were first asking, I had like specific dates or something goals, and like Brittany was saying, I mean, there's definitely those like goals, but not tied to time frames on some of that. But we do track the, like she said, she's got the link out there now.
Okay, yeah.
But beyond what is published out there, a lot of the divisions and departments do have kind of more specific breakdowns of some of these of the statewide tracker measures as well.
Okay. Well, we'll look at that. And then Kirk asked, do we know what the average state funding levels are around the United States so we can have a goal that Missouri tries to move to the middle? This is usually expressed by lane mile or per population or land area. It could illustrate how close to the bottom Missouri is, treating this like a salary study for employees. And I believe that exists because we always are saying Missouri is what, like 47th in the nation for funding.
Yeah, Natasha, I might be able to reach out and see if I can figure out where that data is coming from, because I know MoDOT talks about that a lot, and their conversations with our legislator and whatnot, that for as large as our system is, we are one of we're underfunded, have the least amount of revenue coming in. So I'm sure I would be able to get that information and could share it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and a lot of times, and I guess what I'd be interested in, Brittany, is when we see those rankings, is that based on state revenues? Is that based on what the state's able to also bring in from the federal government? I guess I've never really dug into what those numbers are actually, where they're coming from. So if you're able to find anything else on that too, that would be great.
Okay, yep, I'll see what I can find.
All right, thanks. Okay, anything else or any other thoughts on kind of the performance measures as they stand today? We've, put this report out in some form over the last, gosh, I can't remember when we started actually. We used to just do the report, which I don't have here, but now we've turned it into kind of a broader state of transportation that also talks about more things than just these measures. But then we also always try to do the infographic with these measures. So I feel like, everyone's had a lot of experience with them. I know really just trying to dig more into this significantly delayed roadways and how and when we pull that information, especially since we have more data available than ever before. We should definitely be digging into that. But any other thoughts on that? Okay. And then stepping forward then on the agenda, some of this ties back into where we think we want to end up kind of measuring everything.
Hey, Natasha, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
And if Andy's still on the call, he might be the one to address this, but the traffic incident management subcommittee has been working on similar type performance measures. So it's something that we might want to incorporate into this plan. If we can, I'll let Andy address that.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to use some of the data from the TMC to look at kind of how we're performing on major incidents, and we're looking at time for those major incidents, those lasting over 2 hours, and I think we're going to kind of look at tracking overall percent of incidents that go over 2 hours. So we can look at how are we doing as far as reducing the number of those major incidents. And we're also kind of be able to look at how are we doing as far as our response. Are we doing are we responding in a more timely manner on those incidents over 2 hours? So we're kind of looking at that from a couple of different directions. But yeah, that could be something that we share out beyond the committee.
Yeah, I think it would be great to include some of those things, because that all speaks into a lot of the other factors as well, especially with talking about like delay and travel time and those things. Okay, so with the last plan, we had 6 kind of categories that we used for prioritization, and you know, kind of a number of different kind of, I guess, measures under each of those. And in comparison to what we do for the STIP, so you know, the STIP takes the projects that have already been selected using these measures, because when we do that STIP prioritization, we're only including projects that are in the long-range plan. So in some ways, there's things that have already been kind of addressed. And then there's some other things that I think we've definitely improved upon. And Dave, some of this is going to fall on you. And so I'm curious, you know, when we talk about prioritizing the projects for the STIP versus, let's say, over 100 and some projects for the plan, what does that look like, and what information is available, or kind of the effort that that takes?
Am I supposed to comment on that?
Sure.
I have no comment.
Okay.
No, I don't know. It's just when we can do this whenever, you know, all the information kind of coalesces at some point. So, you know, I think that would be around the prioritization. So once I get all the information and data, we could double the list, add 100 more projects, and it wouldn't be that difficult to go through there and score it.
Okay.
Once I get all the information into, you know, and I was wanting to put that into the next base map too, because, you know, I spent a lot of time working on roadway files. We had 4 different ones for our model. We have MoDOT's roadways, we have center lines and all this stuff. So I've done a lot of work to kind of merge all those files into one shape. And when I do that, that'll have all of this information in a little pop-up that we can all see. So if I need help scoring however many projects, maybe I could, you know, ask somebody to help me out there. But it won't be that hard once everything comes together.
Okay. So I know that we have really changed how we address safety. You know, I think we even had this safety concern before, because sometimes the data doesn't always, or people drive because something feels unsafe, so it does change how they drive, and so maybe the crashes aren't there. But I think we should probably definitely look into something, you know, to continue to use, because I feel like we've really refined how this process works. We also have changed the priority projects to kind of a combination of things, but this high volume corridors. And so we'll probably, especially as we set what some of our recommendations and stuff are for our goals, we'll want to look at what we want to focus on there as well. In congestion management, that has also really changed a lot. I think we don't necessarily always know enough about the projects, going in, especially when you're looking at 25 years about, you know, complying with our access management in the plan. A lot of times the project description would just say that. So I don't know that that was necessarily helpful. And then we have adjusted how we handle some of that volume to capacity as well. You know, I think looking at a range is probably good instead of setting that minimum. Though at the same time, this is kind of looking at the overall list versus selecting some very specific ones. Now, as far as environmental justice goes, so when we do the STIP, we know that we've already kind of prioritized the projects based on having been in addressing, I guess, like all the different disadvantaged groups. And so this one really just does an additional narrowing based on that. At the same time, Dave has gone through and used his hex bins and some additional data to really be able to zero in on kind of the demographics of our region as opposed to being on the very large census tracts. You know, we're able to look more almost to a rooftop level of information. And so we'll probably review how we want to approach that as well. You know, multimodal, I think we're going to have to continue to look at how we have a more comprehensive list and then what that takes as far as doing our projects. And again, it sometimes, you know, just depends on the project description versus, you know, what's going into the project when it hits the ground running in 10 years. And so then economic development, I know we still kind of struggle with what that looks like and how to measure it. And I think, you know, we've talked about this in earlier meetings too. I don't know that we still have come up with a great way to do that. But definitely, you know, local priority, I think that's still important. So I guess I just wanted to kind of touch on these things. We're still going to review, you know, what information is available, or, you know, now that we've been through this process with the STIP prioritization, we have some things, but we'll come back at the next meeting and talk about more specifics and more specific measurements, and then we can get into what that scoring looks like. But I want us to have that conversation while the communities are pulling together project lists, and I know that you guys still all have needs already identified that are your local priorities, maybe kind of regardless of where OTO scores projects. But I want to make sure that we're addressing those, but then also still meeting the goals of the plan. So that said, I am currently working on, and I think I mentioned this at the TPC meeting, I'm working on getting the call for projects out for the TIP. So that'll be 2022 through 2025. And that'll just kind of follow the process we've done in the previous years. But with the plan, we are required to have it fiscally constrained by year for the first 10 years. So the TIP will be the first 5 years. And then, you know, we'll basically have to develop almost like an equivalent of a second TIP as far as fiscally constraining those next 5 years. And then we can do time bands after that through 2045. So be thinking about kind of that midterm specific plan that you want to do for projects as we're developing what we're putting into the TIP. And we will be sending out a separate call for projects for the long range plan. We will be also at the same time asking you to identify STIP priorities when you are submitting those long range plan projects. I know we usually go out and meet with communities every spring, and we talk about your priorities and what's coming up and kind of your needs and everything, and we'll still do that. But we thought this would be a good way, as you're developing those long-range plan projects, to also think about what you'd like to see developed for the STIP. You know, and that'll really just kind of help guide kind of scoping in that future prioritization process. So let's see, there's some things in the chat. I think Kirk might be thanking Brittany. She posted the tracker and then also the Citizens Guide to Transportation Funds. And Kirk just says, this is great information. Thank you. Is there information about average funding level nationwide so we can put goal out there that isn't unreasonable? Yeah, Brittany will look into that and we'll look into that. Thank you, Kirk. So any comments on prioritization or developing a project list for the plan? Okay, well, so just more to come on that. I just wanted to touch on those things. Briefly going over how we had the projects in the last plan, and we'll probably still do some level of this. I'm not really sure how that kind of works with the guidelines for fiscal constraint, but we always kind of had just some general categories of funding set aside. And so we'll probably look into some form of that again. And that all came out of our available funding before we set what was available for new projects. And so I guess also we've always developed a list of constrained and unconstrained, what we can and can't afford. In 2011, I know when we did this, we had a huge number of projects on that unconstrained list, and it really made this funding shortfall number very large. And I think the next time everyone submitted projects, maybe they didn't think quite as grandly, which is all okay also. It's always nice to say, you know, we have a funding shortfall or an unfunded needs list of this amount of funding. So don't be afraid to include a project that may not have funding identified. So, but anyway, I just wanted to touch on those things so we kind of would have a basis for a more specific conversation later. But if there's any comments or questions, we can talk about anything. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. And Kirk, I am so sorry we couldn't understand you, but I'm glad you were able to participate over chat. And you know, if there's anything else, please always just email, and you know, we'll have that documentation and we know what we're putting together. So thank you, everyone. We do have another chat. Kirk says thanks. So with that said, our next meeting actually isn't that far off. It is scheduled for the 11th. And so I think we're going to be able to kind of really move forward and start getting into the true nuts and bolts of putting the plan together. So with that, everyone just have a good rest of your week and enjoy the nice weather this weekend.
Thanks, Natasha. You too.
All right, thanks.
Be safe, everyone.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thanks.
Thanks.